Hey guys, Paul here. So, I've got another one of my probably more controversial Yu-Gi-Oh opinions to share in this video, and that's that I don't really like side decking in the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG. Like, I don't like it as a concept, and I honestly think it could kind of afford to just go. So, I'll explain why before you start screaming at me in the comments, and then I do want to hear what people think about this. Don't worry, I'm not entirely Master Duel pilled, although that has influenced my opinion on this somewhat. Anyway, so side decking, for those of you guys who don't know, because some people actually don't know what side decking is if you started with Master Duel, it's, you've got your main deck of 40 to 60 cards, but you also have a 15 card side deck. And since a Yu-Gi-Oh match in the TCG anyway is best 2 out of 3, between games 1 and 2, and also games 2 and 3, you can trade in cards, like trade out or switch out cards between your main deck and your side deck. And the idea of the side deck is to give you an advantage in the second and third games so that you can sort of swing the matchup in your favor and have an easier time against maybe like a strategy that your deck normally struggles against. And on a fundamental level, I don't actually have a problem with that. To be clear, I don't think that that's like a bad thing. It's just that I feel like in the modern day of Yu-Gi-Oh, the side deck has kind of just become the collection of blowout cards that you use to not really just like tilt the matchup in your favor, but effectively skip the matchup. Try as hard as you can even to create a bit of a non-game and just prevent your opponent from doing anything. And we can just go through, I guess, a few examples of stuff that gets sided commonly. So if you're playing against a Malice deck, you would side in Artifact Lancia. And by using Artifact Lancia, you can pitch it, they can't banish cards, they can't play, because the Malice deck simply has to banish cards in order to play. So effectively, you will be skipping their turn, and then you can defeat them on your turn, and that's just kind of how that goes. Or maybe you're playing against a back row heavy deck. There are historically plenty of these, like, your Eldritch deck in the past, but they're just like any deck that's using, set 4, set 5 type of decks. What would you side in? Lightning Storm, evenly matched. Back when it was legal, Red Reboot. Basically, cards that will completely just destroy all of your opponent's spells and traps. And effectively, the goal being that they are just blown out of the game by that one single card. Also, even if you're going first, there are really powerful side deck cards. Typically, that's where people are going to be siding in Floodgates. This is where I could side in my There Can Be Only One, my Anti-Spell Fragrance. You'll even see cards like Dimensional Barrier, and oftentimes they'll be sided in alongside something like Triple Tactics Thrust. So basically the idea is you go first, your opponent tries to interact with you in any way at all, you activate Thrust, and then you set Dimensional Barrier straight from your deck. And against a deck like maybe Ryzeal, it might just be a blowout, right? Like they have to Xyz summon, they can't Xyz summon, tough luck. Against a fusion deck, can't fusion summon, tough luck. Can't synchro summon, tough luck. Even rituals lose to Dimensional Barrier. And I feel like there's just like countless examples of these cards where really you are not trying to play much Yu-Gi-Oh in games 2 and 3. You are trying to win expediently. And on the surface, I think that it's easy to find the comfort in this, right? Like, well, I lost game 1, but it's fine because like game 2, I'm going to like side in just these blowout cards and they're not going to be able to play, and then we'll get to go to game 3. And there is comfort in that. There is comfort in the idea that, like you've got cards that just prevent them from playing. But then it's kind of like, well, how much are you interested in? Like, this is a personal opinion of mine, so I'm not going to presume that it's the same for all people. But I actually really do enjoy like slinging Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I like to use my in-engine cards. I want my opponent to be using theirs. I don't actually really mind most hand traps, at least the more like Ash Blossom, Imperm, Effect Veiler, Ghost Ogre variety. Obviously, the Droll and Lockbirds and the Lancias and the Shifters are a different story, and that's kind of what I'm getting to with this as well. But like, I don't mind just kind of like exchanging cards, having exchanges and interactivity with my opponent. But the games where I can flip up a Floodgate or just some, Harpy's Featherstorm, Dimensional Barrier, something kind of Floodgate-esque card, or even like just toss a D-Shifter and they just have to kind of like scoop. I'm not very into those games. I don't really want blowouts. I want to sort of engage with my opponent. And so for me, I think that the side deck actually exacerbates most of the cards that people already don't like the most. It's really, when you think about a card like Lancia or a card like Droll, I've heard people say that they want these cards banned. And like, typically the reason they want them banned is because they create non-games. Without a side deck, these would be cards that would be a little bit tougher to main deck. And here's what I mean. So if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, you'll know that it's played in best of ones, and what that oftentimes means is that you are at the mercy of the coin flip, which means that in some games, if you want to play a combo deck, there will be games where you lose the coin flip, your opponent goes first, they set up lots of negates and interruptions, and you simply can't get your combo off the ground. So it necessitates that you do one of two things. You either main deck hand traps, that's in Master Duel, it's like Max C, but also like, Ash Blossoms, Imperms, kind of just safe hand traps that can be used against most decks. Or you have to main deck board breakers, or typically some combination of both. You might main deck Lightning Storms, you might main deck Dark Ruler No Mores, evenly matched, maybe Kaijus. And oftentimes, the reality that you're faced with in Master Duel 2 is that you will have to go above 40 cards to do this. So even if you want to have that airtight 40 card deck, you probably are just going to have to go up to 42 or 44 or something like that in order to include the going second cards or a few more hand traps to feel safe. And I get that there is some discomfort and like unfamiliarity here. People want all of the cards in their deck to be live at all times. Everything needs to be smooth and efficient and like be like a starter or an extender, and that's like kind of it. But I think that Yu-Gi-Oh!, in my opinion anyway, should come with a bit of like risk analysis in terms of deck building, right? How afraid are you of losing to a trap deck? Are you so afraid that you are willing to main deck a card like Harpy's Feather Duster or Lightning Storm or Evenly Matched? Or just, do you want to make the decision between like Evenly Matched versus Harpy's Feather Duster and Lightning Storm? Evenly Matched is good against back row decks, but also can be even good against decks that just put a lot of monsters in the field as long as they don't have like an Omni Negate to negate it with. So like there's a little bit of like a decision to be made around like what board breakers you like the most. Dark Ruler No More kind of also factors into that. Or if you're playing a deck that has more hand advantage or doesn't mind things going to the grave, then Forbidden Droplet becomes a really good sort of board breaker card that actually can be more effective than Dark Ruler No More because it still lets you inflict damage to your opponent and potentially win the game. Whereas Dark Ruler No More is always going to give them a turn. And that same can be said of like Evenly Matched, but not Lightning Storm. And so there's all these decisions that you have to make around these cards and which ones you want to include, what works best for your deck. The same goes for hand traps too, where, you have to sort of pick and choose what hand traps cover the most amount of matchups. That's why in Master Duel, everybody's main decking Maxi and Ash Blossom and Imperm usually, but you won't really see as many people main decking Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion or even like Ghost Ogre and stuff like that. Because those are, or like a DD Crow, right? Those are more specific hand traps and they are a little bit riskier. But to me, whenever I'm playing a game like Master Duel and I see somebody main decking Ghost Ogre, it takes me by surprise, but I kind of got to give them props because like it's tough to make that decision to main deck a card like Ghost Ogre when it's not guaranteed to be useful against every matchup. And even currently in Master Duel, there's a bit of a conundrum people have with like Artifact Lancia or maybe even Chaos Hunter. They're cards that are extremely powerful against the Malice deck, but there's also another deck running around called Ryzeal that has no concern for a card like Artifact Lancia. So now the decision comes down to, are you more afraid of Malice than you are of Ryzeal? Can your deck handle Malice but not Ryzeal? Like that will determine what the cards that you run are. Also, do you want to run like Kaijus in your main deck? It's a little bit scary to do so, but because these games are best of one, you kind of got to like do that. Now, to get back to the TCG a little bit, I'm not saying that I think that the TCG should be a best of one format. I think that it actually could totally still be best of three. I just think that without side decking, people would have to be more thoughtful and considerate and strategic about what they choose to include in their main deck, and they will be forced to make some, unpleasant, uncomfortable compromises with the cards that they include because you won't get to necessarily have the perfect silver bullet to defeat your opponent's deck, and you just get to side it in and choose to go first or second and just, snap your finger and like they just kind of win or lose or whatever and you go to game 3. I don't love that part of competing. I think that it's more fun when the games kind of all feel like a bit of a tango. And you might find yourself asking, well, okay, then if there's no side deck, then like game 2 and 3 will just all be the same, won't they? Well, maybe they will, but I think that the fact that you get to choose to go, like, so let's say you and I are playing and I win the coin flip. Or I'm so used to coin flip from Master Duel. I win the die roll. So I get to go first and kind of set up on you. And it's just really tough for you to pull through that game. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. We go to game 2, though, and you get to go first and do the same. In game 3, presumably I'll get to go first and win, but we know that with modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, it's not really always that simple. A lot more decks kind of have like ways to play in turn 0, and that, I think, combined with the fact that players would be heavily incentivized to run going second cards in their main deck for a change, means that it's not always just going to be a matter of like, oh, I won the coin flip, I automatically win, because now you're main decking those Lightning Storms, those Evenleys, those Dark Ruler No Mores, or maybe you're main decking, more hand traps than you maybe normally would. I think there also is something to be said about the Molcharmi cards in this equation, just because people currently like to main deck Fualos, and some people main deck Perulia, but people usually just side deck Molcharmi Meows. But like, would you consider main decking Molcharmi Meows? Maybe if the top deck is something like a Malice or like some deck that just summons a lot from the grave, could be worth doing. I like the idea that a player could be rewarded for taking that risk on, and maybe even punished for pushing that risk too heavily into like any one category, right? Like if you choose to run too many going second cards, then you'll just open with all of them, and like when you have to go first, you're kind of out of luck. But I think that's fun. Like for me, I want more decisions to be made within the main deck. And I think, and this is maybe abstractly speaking, that this might actually do some work in balancing the cards like the Drolls and the Lancias, because they become riskier to run. And I think you'd actually see fewer of them. When you can just side in Lancia and pick whatever turn order you want to go to, or like the same with Droll or Shifter or whatever, or like D-Barrier, I think that make those cards feel that much more polarizing. But I think that when you have to, take on and assume some risk of like main decking them and them maybe not being useful in a certain matchup, it gets a little scarier. Would you mind main decking Dimensional Barrier knowing that like you might just face a deck that simply shrugs it off entirely, like maybe a Vanquish Soul deck or something? Hard to say. So and one last thing about the side deck conversation. Without side decking, it does mean that you get back anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes of time per round, and we know how crunchy and rushed Yu-Gi-Oh! Time tends to be, and sometimes people will like slow play with side decking and stuff. So there's that. There are downsides too, like the fact that, some people like to maybe side deck into an entirely different strategy as opposed to just blowout cards. Sometimes people will side into a new engine or something, and so we might lose that element of creativity from it. And, fundamentally, it doesn't actually make any of the blowout cards any less broken when they work. It just means that there's more risk in running them. So I'm totally willing to accept that that's an argument as well. And then finally, just the elephant in the room is that it's tradition and we're used to it. And the idea of kind of like looking away from the side deck, something that we've just grown up with in Yu-Gi-Oh! For so long and had for so long, just feels like scary and unappealing. And so that's why I want to hear people's thoughts on this. Try to, hear me out, give me some grace here. Like, I think that without side decking, it would be a neat idea to try. I think it would be cool to see how players adapt to this, what changes will be made, because we know that the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are going to play Yu-Gi-Oh! No matter what. And I don't think that, with or without a side deck, you'll suddenly be beating Ryan Yu or Jesse Cotton because of some, reason that it's unfair. No, I think like at the end of the day, like good Yu-Gi-Oh! Will still prevail. I just think that this could be interesting for challenging deck building and maybe curbing some of the power of like blowout cards and stuff like that, and even saving a tad bit of time in the process. But yeah, I'm interested in hearing what people have to say about it. Let me know down below in the comments. I will be reading and trying to respond, and this weekend I'll be playing in another regional in Rosemont, Illinois, so hope to see you guys there. All right, that's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.